everybody. I'm so glad that you are here for this introduction to Ride and Tie. It is the most fun you can have with another human and a horse, I think. And we're going to just go quickly through what we're going to do tonight, share with you what we want to do, and share with you about Ride and Tie and all our passion with it. We're going to just a quick little kind of agenda here. Welcome. I've already said that. I'll do some introductions in a moment of us. There is a chat feature on Zoom, and so feel free to use that chat feature. You'll find it down at the bottom of your screen. I know if you're using a computer, and you can type in a question, and at the very end, we will answer any and all questions that you have. We will record this, and so it'll be available for others. And so if you don't mind, if you will mute yourself so that we don't have a lot of background noise, that would be really, really helpful. And of course, the purpose here is to provide AERC members with information about both Ride and Tie and Equithon. And hopefully by the end of this evening, you will know all about both of those. And I hope you'll be ready to jump right in with both of those. So we have a couple of us are going to kind of be the master and is it mistress? I don't know if that's right or not, Lonnie, but anyway, master of ceremonies. I'm Courtney Kruger. I am the sanctioning officer for Ride and Tie, and I'm on the board. I would have had 2,000 Ride and Tie miles already, but COVID-19 slowed us up a little bit last year. Hopefully I'll hit that mark this year. And I've one time been on the man-woman team that was national point champion, and my brother-in-law and I have been national point champions for 5 years. We didn't count 2020 as a year for that. We did go for bragging rights, and we missed being the national point championship in 2020 by 5 miles. I begged him to go with me to Florida last week to finish up and win it, but he wouldn't do it for me. So that's a little bit about who I am. Lonnie, you want to tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, I did my first. It's too bad. It's actually probably a good thing. It's too bad they can't see full pictures of us, because if they could see a picture of you, now you look pretty good. I do not look pretty good. So they would know right off the bat that you do not have to be this skinny spandex clad athlete to have the best fun ever. Because we did our first Ride and Tie in 1983. And if there's a mistake that can be made, I have done it. And I have probably done it repeatedly. But it's just a whole lot of fun. And we've done Ride and Ties. We've been able to Ride and Tie from California to Maine to Florida. And it's been just a whole lot of fun.
Super. We also have several folks with us tonight who are going to be our panelists and also give us some more great information. I'm not sure Donna and Sudi are on board, but Melissa, if you will tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Boy, I've enjoyed Ride and Tie for over 2 decades as a participant, veterinarian, and manager, and I've enjoyed all aspects of it. And I tell you, there is just not a more fun sport. It's a great way to enjoy the outdoors with your horse, get a little exercise. And I think the take-home message here tonight should be really how fun it is and how not difficult it is. I think people, but gosh, you can walk and get out there. It's just the sport for you if you want to enjoy your horse and see some fun trails and some fun people. And there's no people in other riding ties. I got to tell you that. It's a great group of people. So I hope this inspires some people to get out there and enjoy the sport.
Thank you. And Larry, tell us about you.
Well, I did my first Ride and Tie in 1982. And at the time I was running my horseback riding vacation business. So I did a bunch of running around, and I thought, well, that's running, right? And it turns out it's not quite the same, but I show you how little I knew about it. I brought my Russian Orlov stallion, Nature's Ballet, as our steed for the first Ride and Tie championship I entered. And people were pretty appalled that I brought a stallion, but he was gray, white. So I took livestock crayon and put 2 great big red hearts on the cheeks of his butt on either side and wrote "stood." And people stayed away from him, and he was a perfect gentleman. We finished barely. We were probably the second to last team to finish, but I've done it other than that with John Melville, who was 72 the last time we completed a Ride and Tie championship. And my kids have done it from the time they were little. It's just a wonderful family sport with all kinds of kooky people having fun.
Yeah. And one of Laurie's claims to fame is that she was doing Ride and Tie as far back when the Levi's company was the actual sponsor. They are actually our inventors, I guess, of the sport. Bud Johns, one of their employees, invented the sport. Well, I want to show you a little video right now, about a 3-minute video that I made a few years ago. It may make you a little bit nauseous because I had a GoPro attached to my chest, and I really should have had it attached to my head, probably. But this is just a little cute, little fun video about what riding tie is, and then we'll go into some more detail. But first, let's see this, if I can make it work.
Let's get ready to rumble! Y'all ready for this? Y'all ready for this?
Okay, so I hope you're able to see that. We're going to now let our absolute expert, Lonnie Newcomb, has done probably dozens of clinics for riding tie. And so, Lonnie, I'm going to turn over to you and let you just tell us more about, we've just kind of seen it, but tell us more and tell us all about the sport. Riding tie is first, and then equine will be next.
So basically, so actually that film was hilarious. And one of the things that, if you reflect on it, is that he said that he had the camera on his chest, but what he saw is exactly what you look at the whole time. Is you're always looking at the ground because you're running on the trail. And that's what makes the thing so hilarious, because when you're staring at the ground, a lot of times you're not looking where you're going or where the horse is. But anyway, so riding tie is two people and one horse that alternate running and riding over a course. It don't have to be two equal people. One person can be a strong runner, one person can be a strong rider. What you'll find is actually better riders do a lot better than better runners. You can be the world's crappiest runner, and as Melissa says, if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, you will do just fine, because the really good runners tend to not be as good horse managers. And so it's really easy to outride them. So even somebody as short and stubby as I am can be competitive just because we're more comfortable on the horse. So what happens is you start, and the races are anywhere from 6 miles to 100 miles. And what you'll find is once you start doing this, longer is more fun. I mean, a minimum of like 20 miles is more fun, because if you do a 6 mile one, poof, it's done. You did all this prep, you got your horse there, got everything ready, and you're done in 30 minutes. So you'll find that really a 10 to 20 mile one is really fun, and a 30 mile one is still very, very doable. But what you do is you start with one person running and one person riding, and they say, and this is very, very similar to endurance. I mean, you're using the whole concept. The reason why endurance and ride and tie are the perfect match is that you're doing the same thing, is that you bring your horse, you train your horse the same way, you bring it to the ride, you check in with registration just like you do in an endurance ride. The vet looks at your horse just like he does at an endurance ride. You stay awake all night freaking out, wondering what you forgot. I mean, all the stuff is just the same. And the only difference is at the start line, one of you is on the ground and one of you is on the horse. And I can't remember if we go through the rules at some point in here, but
We will, yes.
I mean, so there's very few rules here. It's just like the simplest ones is two people can't ride the horse at the same time. But other than that is they say on your mark, get set, go, and whoever's on the horse takes off. And you can do it at whatever pace you're comfortable with and whatever pace your horse is comfortable with. And you can do it with any horse. I mean, if you want to be super competitive, like if somebody came to me and said, I want to come and do a ride and tie and I want to be super competitive, I'd say you need a top 10, 50 mile horse. But you can do it with a Shetland pony, you can do it with a thoroughbred, you can do it with a draft horse and have the best time in the world. And so they say on your mark, get set, go, and whoever's on the horse trots or canters off, and you go for, say, a mile. And usually, since it's hard to judge distance when you're running or riding, we usually go by time. We'll say, I'm going to ride for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to jump off, tie the horse to a tree, and start waddling down the trail. And the person who's on the ground will come running along and be not just doing like Courtney's camera was doing, not only staring at the ground, but periodically looking up, making sure you see what's in front of you. When you tie the horse, you try to tie it not in the way, but in a logical place where the runner would look up and say, oh, thank heavens, there's my horse. You untie the horse, you argue with it, it runs around, it tries to step on you, you finally manage to get on it. And then there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can either, what Courtney showed at one point was a flying tie, is that I would ride first, tie the horse to a tree and go on down the trail. And then my partner would come running up, get on the horse, come to where she finds me, hand me the horse. We just swap right there and I ride off again. That's one perfectly logical way to do it. Another way to do it is for her to pass me and go another 5 minutes, tie the horse to a tree, and you leapfrog down the trail that way. But you can, there's so many ways to do it where you don't have to each run the same distance. I mean, I might run a quarter to a half mile max, and she might run 2 miles, and we'd cover the same distance in that amount of time, but that's okay. So most times what we do is, since most of the time we're now adding them onto an endurance ride, the distances are whatever the logical loops are at an endurance ride. So if the endurance ride has a 14-mile loop and a 20-mile loop and an 11-mile loop, then the ride and tie will be one of those, 1, 2, or 3 of those loops.
Good. Tell us now a little bit about Equithon.
So Equithon is sort of new. We've only had it for 5 or 10 years, and it's a different kind of race where you can either do it with one person can do both the running and the riding, or you can have 2 different people. And the advantage with 2 different people, if you've got somebody who you really want to be out on the trail with, but who really doesn't like your horse, or you really don't like to run, or for whatever, is that it's a race where the first leg is the riding leg, and it's usually, say, 10 to 15 miles. And it's just like with endurance ride, you're not just going out there blasting around. You're riding the course, the segment, just as you would an endurance ride. and the rider would come in, ride the course, and then you come in to the switch point, and the runner cannot take off until the horse comes down to pulse criteria. So that means that you have to be just as smart as you are in an endurance ride. And so if you're if you're doing Ironman, if you're the only person doing it, what happens is you would ride the 15-mile loop, and then in a perfect world, you would have somebody there as a crew. And then once your horse comes down to pulse, you would hand your horse off and take off running. If you're doing it as a two-person sport, then you would ride the horse. And again, then as soon as the horse comes down to parameters, then your runner can take off and you would finish vetting the horse and get it cooled down.
Super. Let me ask Laurie and Melissa, if you want to add anything so far. We're going to go into the rules next, but so far, anything about either Riding Tire Equithon y'all want to add?
Melissa?
Yeah, well, I would say, I think when people picture a ride and tie, they picture the fact that they're going to be running a long way, and it's really not. It's a lot of short intervals. I mean, usually the farthest I will run will be maybe half a mile. So that's the way to think of it, is it's just a lot of short little jogs. And it's incredible if you're a rider, how well you can rest on the horse. I feel fully rested once I hop off the horse, and then I walk or jog my half a mile, and then I get to rest again for a while. The key for me has been finding a partner that's a good runner, because I am not a particularly good runner. I'm a good walker and I can jog, but I am by no means fast. And I just have a great time walking and jogging and then enjoying my riding rest. And so I think that's the way to think of it, is just a little short jogs with a lot of rest in between on the horse. And that's the way to get it done.
And Courtney, I wanted to mention that you were saying that nearly any horse can do ride and tie. I guess that was Lanny who was saying that. And that's for sure. I have leased horses to people to do ride and tie championships, probably close to 30 different horses, or not different horses. Some of the horses did many of the rides, but they ranged in size and breed all over the planet. And my best personal finish in ride and tie, we were a top 4 woman team many years ago on a 12.2 hand. He liked to be called a little horse, not a pony, named Sham. And he was just dynamite on the trails, up and down. So you don't have to have a winning endurance Arab to enjoy and do well in ride and tie. In fact, last time, maybe not last time, but one of the times when I put on the championship, everybody seemed to take off at a trot or canter on their horses, except for one team where the rider was walking the horse from the start, and the runner was walking along next to him. And I had a microphone, and I said to the crowd, "Why do you think these people are walking like that?" And people had different ideas. I said, I bet they're walking now because they plan to win. And they did. And they knew that this was a 40-mile ride over very steep terrain. So they just walked up the first mountainside, and they ended up winning by 20 minutes over the second place team. So strategy and knowing your horse is very important in ride and tie, just the way it is in endurance.
Super. Thank you. And we will get to one of the other things you mentioned a moment ago toward the end, but it's amazing how easy it is for horses to learn to tie. A lot of people say, I could never run, or my horse could never learn to tie. We'll talk about that more, but actually neither of those are necessarily true. So good enough. Well, let's move on into the rules a little bit. And Lonnie, I'm gonna turn it back over to you and share with us a little bit about the rules of ride and tie.
So the rules are on the website. They're a little tricky to find. It's something about how to do it or something. But the first, as Courtney says in one of our pieces of paper, is the first 9 or the first 8 rules are exactly like endurance rules. I mean, the horse, well, or not exactly right, but the rules are very simple. Is there's no medications allowed, no pregnant mares, is the horses have to have a pre-ride vet check. The horses have to have mid-ride vet checks. The horses have to have a post-ride vet check. Everything's exactly the same. Horses have to have a post-ride vet check and pass the vet check at the finish within an hour of completing the course. So all of these are very standard. The decisions of the veterinarian and the veterinary staff are final. So all these things you would be very, very comfortable with, and they make sense. And this is why same as with endurance, you never want to go to an unsanctioned event. You want to go to an event when you have simple, basic rules like this that protect the horse and protect the sport, because they're just sensible. They just make sense. I mean, if there's a horse who's dangerous to people, other horses, they will be excused from the competition. And that's just basic common sense. Then from rules 9 to 10 or on, it gets a little bit more specific. Is like, and all these things, when you first get into it, will be kind of confusing, and then it becomes logical. Is number 9 that says artificial ties are illegal. And you spend a lot of time running around saying, what artificial? Is artificial a telephone pole? Is artificial the side of a car? And it just says an artificial tie is anything that doesn't exist along the trail for everybody to use. So you can't bring a stake and pound it into the ground and tie your horse to it, because if everybody can't use it. So we did a ride and tie in Nevada one time, and all there was sagebrush, and there was a severe shortage of trees. So management just parked a stock trailer out there in the middle of a crossing of the trails. So you knew the stock trailer was going to be there at about mile 4, and then you'd make a loop and you'd come and be back there at about mile 8. So anything that's there for everybody to use is legal, is fine to use. And there are another thing that it says is that hand ties may be allowed. So it's not uncommon at the beginning at the early, like in the first mile or two in a ride and tie, where management says that you can send, if you actually have any friends left at this point, you can send them out on the trail and say, I want you to go to the quarter mile point, or I want you to go to the first switch, which will be the point, or I want you to top it, to go to this first switchback. And then you can have a person out there to hold the horse. That's what a hand tie is. And they can hold as many horses as you like. It's not like, I mean, if Courtney and I were running together, he'd be so much farther ahead of me that we could send one person out there. They would hold his horse when he left, and I could only come along, and they could hold my horse. So there's no, the rules are just, again, logical, but that's what a hand tie is what management can say in the first mile or in the first 2, just because the horses tend to be more excitable and there's more people on the trail, that a hand tie is allowed. It does say that you have to switch at least 6 times during a race. And that's so easy to do, because again, it's no fun if you say, oh, my partner is a marathon runner and he's going to go where it's a 25-mile ride and tie, and he's going to run 24 and I'm going to run 1. I mean, that's just no fun. You're missing the whole point of it, because the reason that ride and tie is so much fun is there's so many things that cannot go as planned, and you have to just laugh about it. Because if you go out there with a very strict strategy, it's going to get blown out of the water in the first 10 minutes. Because if you figure, like, if you're going to go to a foot race, you go to a foot race and you try to remember to bring anything, and you bring your water, and you bring your water pack, and you bring your electrolytes, and you bring your snacks, and you bring your shoes. And the chances of you remember everything is not great. And then if you do it with a horse, if you're going to a competition with a horse, well, so if you add 2 people in one horse, then the things, people can run past the horses can untie themselves. You can you're going to fall down. I mean, falling down in the mud is a guaranteed, and you have to just laugh about it, because it's just such a goofy sport. And it always works out okay, because the horses think it's funnier than we do. The horses love this sport, because when they realize you're out there gasping and struggling next to them, they look at you and say, you don't look so hot. And then the endurance riders always say, I've never seen a happier group of horses, because the horses just think it's really fun to run and then stop, tied to a tree, and run and tied to a tree. They think it's hilarious. But so with the rules, essentially you're supposed to change 6 times for every race. But as Melissa says, you might run and you think it makes sense to say, ride the horse for 4 miles, tie it to a tree, and then you're way ahead of everybody. And then you start running, and you just can't run very fast for 4 miles. You can run pretty steadily for a quarter mile to a half mile, not get tired. Once you get tired, you're done. So you make sure you never get tired, and the horse never gets tired. So it's very, in a 30-mile ride and tie, you might switch 30 times. It's really simple. It does say a required tie will occur at each vet check. So that's one of my disputes. Is it says rider into the vet check must be the runner out of the vet check. Actually, the rules don't say that, but we'll just ignore that one for now. It says the team member, one of the 2 team members, does have to pulse the horse, or does have to take the horse through the vet check. So when you come into a vet check, you can hand the horse to your crew and run right back outside, but one of the team members does have to vet the horse. Two people can't use a horse at the same time, which seems logical, but that means that one person can't be riding the horse and one person be tailing. Obviously, two people can't ride the horse at the same time. And so the rules are just pretty simple, and we try really hard and never, I mean, in my 25 years of this, I don't think we've added a rule. I mean, we really try really hard not to add rules because it's just supposed to be logical. And the only other thing is that the team, so that your finish time stops when all three people cross the finish line. The two people and the horse, is that if the first person comes galloping across the finish line and the runner's back there, your time doesn't stop until all three of you come across the finish line, or if the runner comes across first. Anyway, so that does sort of exciting is that both horses and riders will be across, and you'll see two people running, and that's where you can get the pretty exciting finishes. But you're not obligated for everybody to cross at the same time. It's of course cooler if the three of you manage to cross at the same time, but that's when your finish time stops, is when all three of you cross the finish line.
Thank you. Melissa and Larry, you want to say anything about any of the rules?
I would think the rule of, as Lonnie suggested, about 6 ties during the ride is pretty easy to meet, because you're likely going to be switching many more times than 6 times. And then I think the rules are very straightforward. They're not complicated by any means. I think the only one that might mix up on people is 2 people can't use the horse at the same time. So basically what that means for endurance riders is if your partner's on the horse, you can't be tailing the horse at the same time, because that's the horse helping 2 people. But other than that, I think the rules are very straightforward, and they just make a lot of sense. And there's just not a lot of them, so they're easy to comply with. Good.
Okay. Well, one question I get a lot is what kind of tack and equipment do you need, and how do you train? And so any of the 3 of y'all that might want to talk about that, just jump right in and let's talk a little bit about training, tack, and equipment.
So I'll start for the horse, and this is entirely dependent on what you're comfortable with, because it amazes me. Our horses may have been doing ride and tie for 15 years, and they still are little devils who will do anything they can to get in trouble. I mean, we might have a horse who's done 2,000 ride and tie miles, but today will be the day he decides he's going to pull back. And so what we do, which is not what everybody else does, is, but I don't use the halter bridle combinations because they have hardware on them. And I've never met a piece of hardware that a horse couldn't break if it felt like it. And if I'm out 20 miles from nowhere, the very first time we went out west, we went out and leased a horse from a guy named Cliff out in Idaho. And what he said, which has always stuck with me, and he was kind of joking and kind of not, he says, when I tie a horse, at least his head will be there when I get back. And that's kind of my philosophy, is I don't want to come across a broken bridle or a piece of this or that. Because what a lot of people do here do in the East is they'll either wear a bridle and then have a standard nylon or other halter on top of it with a lead rope. And that lead rope snap is not good enough for me, because I've never had a horse who, and they don't do it out of fear. If they just think it would be hilarious to lay back on the halter until they break something and trot off into the woods, I don't find that very amusing. So what we've always done is use a rope halter with no hardware on it, and with the rope spliced into a nylon rope spliced into the onto the halter, and because in that video that Courtney showed, his horses are way better than mine because he can use carabiners and he can use snaps, and that's typical horse. I've even seen people down at Big South Fork in Tennessee, and this would horrify you, except the horses did brilliantly. Is I've run in my own way. I've run past a horse that they had gotten off, unclipped the rein from one side of the bridle from the bit, put the rein around the tree, not snugged it up or anything, and clipped it back to the bit, and the horse was placidly standing there. So you can do that if you have a really good horse. And ours are always either trying to put their feet over the rope or do, just because it cracks them up to do that. So we always use, I mean, I don't even care what kind of bridle I have on. I just want to make sure there's a halter that keeps the horse attached to the tree. And we also use, from having gone out west a bunch, is we use a standard lead rope is not long enough, because you want to be able to, like when you're out west with where Larry comes from, and there's, what do you call those big trees, the sequoias or something? I mean, sometimes there's nowhere else to tie, and you'll get off your horse, say stay, and you run around the tree and you come back and the horse is still there, and then you tie with whatever rope you have left. So sometimes you need a very long rope. Or if there's no, like you're running through a gully and all there are is roots up above you to tie to, you want to have a pretty long rope for that. But it totally depends on your horse, because most people's horses are better trained than ours are, and ours just like to be difficult. And what it says here is, again, you're always wondering what to do with the rope. And so when you first start riding tie, you almost always dutifully tie the rope around the horse's neck and make this fancy little knot. And that lasts for about 2 miles. And then you realize that it takes way too much time. If you did that at every tie, you're losing 20 seconds or so at each tie. You just ride along with the rope in your hand. But so any kind of saddle works. Whatever's comfortable for you, whatever's comfortable for the horse. And usually on the shorter riding ties, maybe we don't use electrolytes. Maybe you wouldn't carry an easy boot. On the longer riding ties for, that are 10 or 15 or 20 miles, I don't think there's any of us who haven't lost a shoe. So you want to be prepared for whatever happens out there on the trail. But for us, the main thing is tying the horse so I know its head will be there when I get back. I don't want it gone, because my knots have come undone. I mean, there's a million different kind of knots, and you just have to practice. But that's the big thing, is making sure the horse is not trotting around in the national forest without you. Melissa, do you want to do the people part, because you're more people-y than me?
Okay, sure, Lonnie. For the people, again, if you're an endurance rider, you likely have a lot of these things already anyway. You want to be in comfortable shoes. I think that's important. I just run in a regular trail shoe. Water is going to be very important, and those you can refill at the vet checks. So it's a good idea to have, if you can, get a crew for you at the vet checks to refill your bottles. And it is a good idea, as Lonnie says, as the slide says, to keep one with you, at least one, and then you can keep your backup bottles on the horse, on the saddle. Snacks are always a good idea on the longer riding ties. On the short ones, you likely won't need that. I typically, when I do riding ties, use tights, not shorts. For me, it's a lot more comfortable if you're going through brush. You don't get rubbed by the saddle as much. And then the cover for the saddle is a really good idea. It keeps you much more comfortable. I also carry with me some, in my pack on the riding tie, a packet of goo. It's a great little energy snack. Some Tums, sometimes my stomach doesn't agree with me, and maybe some ibuprofen if I'm getting a bit sore out there. One thing on the tack I would also suggest is, if it's really ideal, of course, if you and your partner are about the same height, then there's no issue with the stirrups. Where that can become a problem is when there's a discrepancy in leg length between you and your partner, and then you have to do some practicing there and find out what works best for you and your partner both. I think most of us have found that it's easier to ride in the stirrups that are a little bit too short than too long. So usually it's the taller partner that has to give up a little and just ride a little bit short, much easier than for the shorter partner to ride too long. That would be my only suggestion on the stirrups. And Larry, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, a couple of things. I wear a riding helmet while I'm riding and when I'm running. I don't take my helmet off and hook it to the saddle or whatever when I'm running. These helmets are so lightweight nowadays, and they actually, I think, keep you cool. And when I told you I leased horses to a lot of people for riding tie, and one of the things they had to do was agree to keep their helmet on the whole time they were in the competition. And most of them found it was easier to just keep it on while they were running. And in terms of stirrups, I'm a 4'11" when I stretch. And most of my riding tie partners have been, well, up to a foot taller than me. And what we've done is weld 2 English stirrups, one on top of the other. And then the person with longer legs obviously rides in the bottom stirrup. And I get to climb up on the horse by climbing up on the longer stirrup. And then I take the shorter stirrup. And it's amazing the way those stirrups, they ride really well. The bottom part of the stirrup just kind of goes further away from the horse, and we haven't had any trouble with them catching on branches. That would be something you might worry about. But since I ride English, the stirrup leather would come off of the bar, the stirrup bar, if I got caught on anything. So helmets and stirrups.
Good, thank you. And I would add my partner and I'm 5'6", and my partner is about 6'1", and we've tried the ladder stirrups like Larry just mentioned, and we didn't really like those that well. We tried for a while adjusting the stirrups every tie, and that works if you want to ride really comfortably and you're not terribly worried about time. That's fine, but that was taking us 30 to 40 seconds to tie to adjust the stirrups, and we finally realized we weren't being very competitive. And so now we've gone to, like Melissa said, he rides a little short and I ride a little long, and that's worked well for us. All right, well, we're going to move right along. During the race, we've said most of this, but anybody want to mention any things that you want to talk about what we do during the race? Let me go ahead and mention that top bullet there. And I think somebody's already mentioned this before. It feels and sounds inefficient to say, well, we're only going 5 minutes or only going a half a mile. And then we're going to do a switch. And in a sense, it is inefficient because it takes time to get off the horse and tie the horse to a tree and that kind of thing. But it keeps your legs so fresh and keeps the horse's legs so fresh that over, particularly one of the longer races, it just works. And so in a 30-mile race, you may have 60 switches or so, but it actually, it's amazing how much better that works than going longer. The other thing that's great about that is if something goes wrong and you're only a half a mile or less away from your partner, you can figure it out. If somebody misses a turn or whatever, the horse maybe gets loose and heads back down the trail or whatever, you can figure out what's wrong and fix it a whole lot faster than if you're a mile apart or 2 miles apart or whatever. Anybody else want to say anything else about during the race strategy or
Yeah. I'll say one thing or a couple things is, so when you say that, and this makes it make a lot more sense when you say mount the horse on both sides. And I will admit that in my long career, I've never managed to get on the right side because I'm a lazy person, but my partner does hop on and off. That's her side. So she hops on and off on the right side. But that's because if you figure that you're going to be climbing on this horse 60 times, their girth on the off side, wherever you are, gets pretty darn sore, is because when you're pulling on the saddle, it's pulling on the girth on the off side. So as long as the two of you are not using the same side the whole time, and it's not something you have to do right away. It's not something you have to do in your first year or 2 or 3 of ride and tie. But if you just put that in your mind, is that it's useful to the horse if the two of you use different sides, then they don't get quite so sore on their rib cage because it's mainly just pulling on the saddle. And then we all know as endurance riders how to take care of our horses. We know that if you're trailering them, they have to be well hydrated before you start the race. We know about electrolytes, we know about nutrition, but the absolute thing is true for you as a runner, because most of us endurance riders are not, we wouldn't call ourselves runners. And there are a lot of them that are. There's a lot of them who are really great runners, but you have to, so Melissa says, you need to carry water. You must carry water on the horse with you. And then what happens is when you get off, you must carry it with you, because you cannot, it's very hard to drink since you're on the horse trying to make time. You're trying to trot or canter. You're not going to get a lot of drinking done when you're on the horse. And so I usually leave and even if you use a pack, even if you use a camel pack, something like that. So just whenever I hop off the horse, I always take my water with me or my drink with me, and you'll use whatever works for you, whatever electrolyte drink works for you, but you drink on the ground and you drink the whole time you're on the ground. And then when you find your horse, you put the bottle back in the pack and go again, but you have to drink enough, because we always giggle because guys are very fast and guys are very tough, and they always run faster than they can go for a long, long time. And they do try to wear shorts, and they always end up raw. So you can beat guys hands down, even if you're short, fat, and slow like me, because they're going to run themselves into a cramp because they won't drink enough, they won't eat enough, and they won't protect their legs enough. And they always cramp up about 5 miles from the finish, and you look really sympathetic as you go past them. But you can avoid that by making sure you hydrate well. Just take it easy. This is not, you know, it's usually, especially if you're doing this with an endurance ride, is the 50-mile riders or the 100-mile riders are going to be out there way longer than you are. So it doesn't mean you're doodle daddling around, but it does mean that you need to be comfortable. You need to want to do this. You need to want to be having fun. You're not gasping and red and cramping up. You need to be going at a pace that, you know, they always say when you're running, you need to be able to talk. Well, not maybe that much, but you need to keep track of your electrolytes, your hydration, and your pace. So you're, you know, we don't run up hills. We walk up hills. I mean, because if you can't keep going, you're no good to anybody. If you make yourself so tired you can't help your horse, you're not helping anybody. So save yourself enough so you can get to the end.
All right, and I'm gonna skip ahead, or not skip ahead, but I'm watching the time. Vet checks. Both Melissa and Lonnie are vets, so y'all tell us about vet checks.
So the main differences with ride and tie is that there's no mandatory holds. So, and that's because horses have constant small rests all the time. So you might run, you know, you might canter a half mile, or you might canter a quarter mile or a mile, but then they stand tied to a tree. So if you think of the timing, is I usually ride the horse 5 minutes. I used to ride 6 minutes, but we've gotten older. So I usually ride the horse 5 minutes, and then I get on the ground and I start waddling along. And so you figure that horse is going to have close to a 5-minute rest there before the second runner comes along, or maybe even more, might have a 6 or 7 minute rest before the next rider comes along and picks it up and goes again. So they have constant short rest. So they don't have any mandatory holds. Number one, because they don't need a mandatory hold. And number two, because if the horse had to stop and rest in the vet check, then the runner who was out there on the trail could get so far ahead. The horse usually already has to run for 45 minutes to an hour before they actually catch the first runner. And it's not helpful for the horse to have to keep that pace. So with that in mind, then what happens is at the vet checks, if you're with endurance rides, it's common for the head vet to make an announcement at the pre-race briefing to say, we're going to allow the ride and tie horses to cut in line if possible. I mean, there's never very many ride and tie horses, and we try to be really polite about it. But if there happens to be a line, which there hardly ever is, but if there happens to be a line for the vet, we do try to let the ride and tie horses go on and move up first, because they don't have a hold. They're not sitting there eating in line as part of their 30-minute hold. They need to get back out on the trail as fast as possible. So I'll leave the rest for Melissa.
Yeah, a good strategy that I have found useful for the vet checks is to have the stronger runner ride into the vet check and run out of the vet check, because typically that will be the longest run that you're going to be doing, is leaving the vet check. So you want your stronger runner leaving the check. It does take some time for the horse to go through the vet check. And so it's just an efficient way to make up time to have the stronger runner out on the trail during that time. And earlier when I talked about easy, at least for me, shorter runs, we will spread out a little bit before the vet check. That'll be our longest run. So we'll usually make a switch, maybe 3/4 of a mile, maybe even a mile out before the vet check. And the reason is it gives the horse a little time to come down, recover, drink, and maybe eat a little bit. So that will be your biggest gap. Your longest run is coming into the vet check and going out of the vet check. So I would say that's one strategy tip there.
That's a great tip. Thank you. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the finish. And the finish is very similar to endurance, and it actually follows the endurance and not the LD rules, which means, as Lonnie mentioned earlier, the race is over for your team when sometimes we'll say all 3 heartbeats get across the finish line, or you could say all 8 legs do, but the horse and the 2 humans. And then that's if you come across first and then you subsequently vet through, you have won the race. It's not the first to vet to pulse down like it might be with an LD. It's rather like the endurance. So that's the first across the line that then vets through eventually wins, but you don't have to vet through first. You just have to cross the finish line first. One difference in endurance and ride and tie is you have an hour from the finish to the to present the horse for the post race vet checks. You have an hour to get the horse's pulse down and get it to the vet check. As you see on the screen, we typically don't do best condition except at championship events, but we do that. And if it's a bigger race, we may. If there's 10 or 12 teams, then we might. And then we've already mentioned, Alani already mentioned, you don't have to cross the finish line together. And sometimes that can be strategy. As you see that top picture up there, that's a team coming in together. And that's a lot of fun when you come in together. But if you can come in quicker, if your runner's out ahead or your horse is out ahead and you've already agreed, we're going to try to just finish this race ahead of the other competitors, then it may be that you're not going to come in together. And it works either way. Anybody want to say anything else about the end of the race?
Well, I just have one comment. You know, when I was talking earlier about coming into the vet checks is when you're going to be most spread out partner, I would say the opposite's true, because as Courtney pointed out, your finish time does not stop. The clock doesn't stop till all three of you are across the finish line. So it doesn't really do you any good to have the horse and run out in front, one runner way out in front. So typically, as we get closer to the finish line, is make our ties shorter. We stay real close together because the idea is for all three of us to finish together at the same time.
And just like endurance, there are some wonderful photo finishes. Sometimes it's a runner trying to beat a horse to the finish line because they know the other runner's already crossed or whatever. In a race earlier this year, I had a runner come up behind me and she was a much faster runner than I was. And I just pushed and barely came across the finish line ahead of her. And so that is some of the great competition is right there at the end, just like as happens in endurance. Well, I'm going to skip ahead to frequently expressed concerns. I think we've already talked about this a little bit, but let me just ask any of y'all that want to comment on any of these three questions or these three concerns.
I think the bottom one is what usually stops a lot of people here, especially on the East Coast. And most of it's not that your horse won't tie. I mean, of course, you take your horse out of the barn, you take your horse out of the field, you tie it up, you tie it to the trailer, it stays there. And your concern is, what is it going to do when another horse goes by, when another horse trots? And they just think it's hilarious is that, and all of us say the same thing, is the first time you take a brand new horse out to a ride and tie and you go ahead for the first mile, you jump off, you tie it to the tree, and the horse is totally like, what the heck? I mean, and you run off and the horse is like, this is not okay. I mean, I'm being left out here in the woods and what's happening? And then the second runner comes along and the horse is, whoa, oh, hey, okay, all right, you're here too. They get on and they ride. They'll do that a second time. And by the third tie, what happens is you're on the third tie, you tie the horse up to a tree, you run off, and the horse doesn't even look at you. It turns back and it watches for the next runner to come up the trail. They figure out really fast that there's two people involved in this, and they turn back and they look for their second person. They also figure out, it doesn't take them very long at all to start knowing that you're looking for certain trees, is that you'll be trotting down the trail and they know, because like one of the things we didn't talk about, but was where to tie is the horses learn what the perfect tree is. It's this big around, but not that big around. It's this far off the trail, but not too far off the trail. And the horses will pull over and say, this is a good tree to tie to, because they know exactly what you're looking for. So they figure it out. But if you want to get started with this and are not sure, or in particular, if you're running with a junior, it's very common for a kid and a parent or a kid and an adult to stay together, because you don't want your 6-year-old out there in the woods on an Arabian careening through the bushes. So there's absolutely, it's totally fine for you guys to take turns running next to the horse and riding the horse. That's totally fine. The reason that you wouldn't do that on a regular basis is you're limited to the speed of the runner. But if that's what makes it safe and the horse likes it and everybody has a good time, then that's totally fine. Another way to do it is you can't have unentered horses on the course, just like the same as with endurance, but you can just get two other people. You can have two teams together. And and we've done many times, if we have a new horse, 4 of you will run together and 2 people will take the horses up and they'll tie 2 horses together at a tree, and the horses stand there and look at each other, and the 2 people run off. And then the other 2 people come trundling along and untie the horses, and the horses are totally cool with that. If there are 2 horses tied into the trees, they don't care how many other horses are going by. They're like, y'all have a good time. Let me know how it goes. But it's so it's a very, I don't think we've ever had a horse that wouldn't do this, because prefer not to have a horse. You know, I mean, if you had a horse that wouldn't tie, it wouldn't be your maybe favorite horse. And so they all figure this out, and they figure out that if I stand here, I can puff, I can gasp, and that's another reason I always say is that the reason that ride and tie horses have such a tremendous completion rate is that you get off, and while you're tied up, you're standing there next to it, listening to it breathe, and you know if you're pushing it hard enough, or you know if you're not pushing it hard. I mean, you know what the pace is. Whereas when you're endurance riding, you tend to get caught up, and you're not always hearing them. You can't stop and listen to them breathe. So ride and tie horses tend to have a very long career, and they tend to have very, very good completion rates because the runners are listening to them so well.
I just want to mention, you always want to tie your horse on the uphill side of the trail. Especially out west here, we have some trails that go along with a drop off on one side and a, uphill. And you want to tie on the uphill side, because if you tie on the downhill side, the horses do tend to wheel around the tree to kind of look for the other partner that's coming up. And you don't want them to drop over an edge when they wheel around the tree. So that perfect tie tree is going to be on the uphill side.
That's a great tip. Thank you. Well, let me share with you real quick 3 different online opportunities for you. Rideandtie.org is our website, and you will find the race schedule on there. And we already have a number of races that are, of course, this year COVID dependent, but it's looking like that we're going to have a number of races this year. And just today, a race at the end of February in South Carolina, somebody is registered for, and we're going to sanction, and a race in Parrottsville, Tennessee just came up today in June. And so we're getting even more all the time. You'll find that at rideandtie.org. If you do Facebook, there are 2 different Facebook groups I would strongly encourage you to join: Ride and Tie and East Coast Ride and Tie Folks. And even if you're not on the East Coast, that's okay. And if you have any questions, if you ask a question on the Ride and Tie or the East Coast page, you will get lots of great and enthusiastic answers. And so please plan to sign up for those or join those groups so you can learn more. If you want to try Equithon, and Ride and Tie is offered, but the ride manager doesn't say anything about Equithon, ask them about it. And if they say, I don't know anything about it, have them get in touch with me. I'm the sanctioning officer. They're already going to know me, and I can help. I call Equithon the entry levels, the what do you call it, the gateway drug into Ride and Tie, because you may have a person who loves to run, has never been on a horse, and so you can ride your horse and they can run, and then they got thinking, well, maybe I want to try riding that horse and whatnot, and I guess it could go the opposite direction as well. But feel free to ask for an Equithon if you would like. But Equithon has its wonderful characteristics, but it really is just a way to get into Ride and Tie. So I think that's about here is our calendar for this year, but it's already out of date because, like I said, already a couple of races that we've added. But you see, you've got a pretty full calendar already. And I'm gonna come out of screen share now, so maybe y'all can see us for the first time, and ask if have we had any questions? Oh yeah, we have several. Looks like. Let's see. Audrey Hager asked, if your horse is already used to regular endurance ride, will they switch to Ride and Tie easily, or will they get upset with all the short jogs and switches? Who wants to handle that question?
Well, I'll say that, again, I'm not much of a runner myself, and I've only done 5 Ride and Ties, all of them having been the long version of the championship. And I've ridden different horses that have never done Ride and Tie before. And the various horses I've leased out for Ride and Tie competitors, most of them have never done Ride and Tie before. Now, Lanny survived riding one of my horses who really thought this was going to be a race. But all my other horses just immediately figured out, as Melissa was saying, that they get to rest, they get to, look around and see what's happening, and they've taken to Ride and Tie very easily. And some of them were just trail horses, not just trail horses, but some of them were accomplished trail horses and hadn't really done endurance at 50-mile distances at all, but yet they handled Ride and Tie quite well.
Good, thank you. Another question: when you jump off your horse to run, what do you do with your helmet? Just keep it on during the run? And I think Laurie says she does. I do, but some people, the team just uses one helmet, and they'll either tie it, attach it to the horse somewhere, or set it on the ground out of the way of the horse. You can do it either way. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lonnie.
That doesn't work as well as you think, because you see this all the time. Is as they were saying, the newer helmets, the Troxels or whatever, or the ones that look like pecans, they're so light. I mean, you don't even notice they're there. And what always happens is that if you mean to leave it on the horse, you're going to forget and you're going to run off. And so whoever comes to the horse now has a horse without a helmet. And that's kind of an issue for me. Or if you set it on the ground, the horse is going to stomp on it, kick it, and it's much easier. I mean, if at the very least, because there was a stage when we all were using bike helmets because they're so lightweight, they don't actually provide as much protection as you wish you might want to have. But it's much easier if you just both have a helmet and just leave it on your head, and you won't even notice it's there. Otherwise, at least once or twice on the trail, you're going to be running down the trail and think, oh, bummer, I'm still wearing my helmet, which means the horse does not have the helmet with it.
I would also say that it is pretty gross too, and you just kind of get used to it. But if you're sharing a helmet, you're gonna put a helmet on. It's gonna be covered in sweat, dripping in sweat from your partner, and you might not want to do that either. Another question: are you, as a runner, is there a time when you have a hard time finding your horse, maybe running by your horse, or maybe you can't find your horse in the pack of tied horses?
We usually decorate our horses with surveyor's tape hanging off of them and writing funny things on their butts, or somehow making them look different from your average gray Arabian. But I think we've all run past our horse at some point or the other.
Oh yeah. And I think exactly what Larry says is that it takes a little bit, whether it's one race or two races, to learn your partner's habits and to know how far they're going to go and where they're likely to tie. And of course, not everybody has the same partner all the time. That's a total luxury. It's fun to switch partners, but it's also fun to have one partner all the time, because then you know exactly where they're going to tie. You just feel it, and you know when to start looking for your horse. And it's kind of like if you're marking a trail, if you're laying out a trail for an endurance ride, what they always say is look ahead, and where your eye falls, that's where you want to hang the ribbon. I mean, you don't want to hang the ribbon around the corner. You want to hang the ribbon where your eye naturally falls. And the same thing is true with the horse. Is you want to tie you definitely not want to tie the horse 20 feet off the trail. I mean, because they are the sneakiest little ninjas you've ever seen in your life. Is they zip their lips. They can stand behind a 4-inch pole and be invisible, and they will do it on purpose because they're laughing so hard oats are coming out of their nose. Is that if you tie them to the tree, and you'll see one eye on either side of the tree and one ear, and they're being absolutely quiet. And we do a nighttime ride and tie at the Old Dominion in Virginia, and we had one horse who always managed to stand just such a way that her glow sticks were hidden, and you'd be running down the trail and run smack into her side every time because she thought it was hilarious. And then but it's once you know where to look for your horse, it's not hard to do, and especially if it's decorated, as Larry says, with different markings or whatever, so you know which one for sure is yours.
Good deal.
Don't tie your horse in a patch of poison oak.
Yeah.
One time my partner did that, tied our horse in a huge patch of poison oak. And when I berated him afterwards and I said, you tied him right in a patch of poison oak. He said, Larry, I don't get poison oak. Point being, I do.
Good deal. Another question. Can you clarify if tailing is allowed? That is, one rider on the horse and the runner following behind, tailing up a hill.
Melissa?
Right. So that answer is
Yes. Go ahead, Lonnie.
That's two people using the horse. Now, out west where people are pretty competitive and pretty long and leggy and wear a lot of spandex, if it's advantageous for the horse, they might be tailing the horse instead of riding it. We always figure I feed you, you carry me. And so you may have one person on the horse, but not one person using the tail at the same time. If you're super fit and it's to the horse's advantage, you may send the horse on ahead and tail it yourself, but they can still be only one person attached to the horse.
Good. Thank you. Another question. Are loose or missing horses much of a problem?
Okay, I'll answer that because we're here on the East. Is that it's different where Melissa comes from and because they have a lot more space. And our concerns are always highways. This is something that you may not want to talk about, but when we lay out a course, we make sure that if a horse does get loose, it can't get to a road. However we lay out a course or how we do that. But it's much less, because what happens is the horse is logically going to either go back down the trail or go back up the trail. It's going to stay. It's very, very uncommon. And we've certainly had ours get loose because I tied them badly. And every single time the next ride and tire has caught them and just tied them up. Because the horse will logically, it's not going to go cross country, crashing to the bushes. It's going to say, I'm out of here, man. And it's going to turn around and either go back down the trail where it came from, in which case the next person will catch it, or it's going to come down the trail behind you and somebody will catch it. But there's so many runners on the ground anyway that they pick them up.
That's also one of the great things, I think, that partnering with AERC. We lost a horse one time. We got loose and we couldn't find it for about 6 hours, and an endurance rider found it and ponied it in to camp for us. And so that's the more horses that are out there, I think the better it is. Okay. Yep. Next question. If you have a crew, can the horse be ridden into the vet check, leave the horse with the crew and run out? Or does one team member have to stay with the horse in the vet check so that the member who rides the horse in waits for the runner to come in before leaving?
I can answer that. And that speaks back to when I was talking about the strategy of having a longer tie going into the vet check, because when the rider rides the horse into the vet check, they can hop off, grab their water bottle, should not leave without a water bottle, and run out of the check. And that's where you want your strong runner on the ground, because that's going to be the longest stretch. And if something unfortunately goes wrong with the horse isn't having a good day and doesn't pass the vet check, it's ideal to have the stronger runner out there, because they're going to end up likely doing the rest of the course on foot. And again, it's so important when you leave that vet check to have water, because you really never know how long you're going to be out there for.
And I would also say, if you're trying to be competitive, when I first started, I would come into the vet check and I'd lounge around for a while, eat a sandwich, drink a Coke or whatever. And then I figured I'm just burning a bunch of time. And I really came into riding tie from running. And so I realized if I'm out running a half marathon, I don't stop halfway through and just take a 15, 20-minute break. And so now my standard is a 20-second vet check. I come in, I give the horse to my crew, I grab something to drink, and maybe I grab a sandwich that's already pre-prepared, and I am back out on that trail, because as long as I'm moving, our team is still moving forward. You don't have to be that competitive, but that is one way that you can do that. And I kind of pride myself on that now. Okay, next question. I understand so far that I can do a ride and tie with my daughter who's 11 years old, but she's also interested in doing a ride and tie with her friend who is another junior, 10 years old. Is this allowed, or must an adult be on the team?
I think that depends on race management. And it's because I certainly would understand race management's concerned. We have a lot of 10 and 11-year-olds here who are better horsemen than most of us adults. And they come from endurance families. So I don't think I think the only ride and tie rule is that if you're under 16, you must wear a helmet. But I think other than that, it depends, because I know Sarah has a rule, SERA has a rule with the age of how young a junior can be to ride an endurance ride. And so I think it actually depends on race management. You have to talk to the race management about that and do whatever they say. They've got to be happy.
That would be another great situation where it let the 11 and 10-year-old compete, but you find a partner for you and another horse and go with them together. That would be a great opportunity, I think, for that, so that each junior has an adult with them, whether they're on the horse or on the ground. But they still get to do that together. Okay, good. All right, next question. Thank you so much. Can you hike or walk the runner's pieces and not run at all?
Oh, heck yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You can walk the whole thing, walk and jog, and you don't have to be a runner.
Absolutely. Yep.
Not.
Okay, next question. Are there different divisions, such as masters, for more senior competitors versus a division for the younger competitors?
The last ride and tie I did, I partnered with John Melville, who was 72 at the time, and there was a Century in the Saddle Award. So I only need to cut to being 28 to be, and listen, we were like 6th place team. There were so many over 100 combined ages competing for that award.
So the short answer there is there are some of the rides offer masters just for fun kind of thing, but everybody's in together, men, women, give me a man team, man-woman team, woman-woman team. We're all in together, competing together, and ages and genders and that kind of thing don't matter. But we all have a great time, and then that's okay. I'm getting older and not as quick as I used to be, but I'm still loving it. Okay, next question. You've all talked about leasing horses for riding high. Is that common? My sister and I are runners and riders, but no longer have a horse of our own.
I think a lot of people ride somebody else's horse, whether it's a friend or a neighbor's or your spouse's horse or whatever. And as I said, over the years, because I was in the business of a trail riding and riding vacation business, I had a lot of horses who were trail wise and safe and sane to ride. So I did lease horses many, many times, never had a problem. I'm going to say to other people who are considering leasing their horses, not every one of my horses finished every race, but a pretty high percentage. And the riders, I always said to them, oh gosh, I remember when Lanny and her partner Kathy emailed me about leasing a horse for the championship. I didn't know who they were. And I said, I'm putting on the championship and I only lease horses to people who are riding to finish, not to place in the top 10 or win or anything like that. And I know all the vets there. And if I think you're overriding my horse, I'm just going to raise my right eyebrow and you're out. And Lanny emailed back and said, yes, sir, ma'am, absolutely. We'll follow everything you say and sign their full names. And I realized, not only were they experienced riding tires, but veterinarians and head vets of many of these races. And anyhow, I think that most people who lease a horse do it with a really good understanding of what the owner of the horse wants and what the horse is capable of.
And I think Larry has been one of the greatest supporters of riding tie out west, because it's the Western people have a totally different mentality than the Eastern people. Is the Western people are willing to let other people ride their horses, and East Coast people aren't. East Coast people never let their horses out of their hands. And so if you want to ride in the East, then what we do is we hook you up, or if you want to ride in the East, what you need to do is get on those Facebook pages, the East Coast Ride and Tie folks that he talked about, because we get people all the time who said, I'm interested in getting into the sport. And what we do is we hook you up with the 10 or 20 or 30 people who are always doing this. And they say, actually, yeah, there's one coming up and I have an extra horse, or I have a space. I mean, I know I've just lost a runner and I need a space filled, because especially with ride and tie, it's very, very common for teams to be formed at the race itself. Is that you come just a crew, or you come, always bring your shoes, always bring your sneakers and your riding helmet, because it's very common for some reason somebody's plane gets canceled or they can't come, and we're always running around looking for a team member. So if you're on site, that's a good place to be. But at least in the East, if you hook up with those Facebook groups, then you'll be part of the team, and we'll say, oh, hey, we're doing a training run here, just come, we've got a spare horse, things like that. The West Coast is different because if you can hook up with people who know the Western people, like the Ribleys or like Larry, then they can say, well, and I don't have one, but here's a few names you can call. And so it can be done.
Good. The next question is similar, and this is, how do you find a partner? All my friends ride. I don't know anyone who runs and rides. You have to know them well enough to trust your horse with them. And I would begin by saying that if you have a horse, you will never be without a partner. You can put up on the Facebook pages, I'm going to so-and-so ride, but I'm looking for a partner. The question is, do you know them well enough to trust the horse with them? And if you can meet up with them ahead of time and maybe make sure or whatever, that works. I don't know any bad stories of people that have met up for the first time and gone out and ridden, but I don't know. Anybody else have another idea beyond the Facebook pages?
I think in this day and age, it's social media, and that once you get booked in, then you're part of the group and you're there. But you have to get,
yeah, good. Okay, 3 more questions. Well, no, another one popped up. What is the distance of the championships? Do you need to qualify to participate at a championship?
So the answer is you do not need to qualify. If Sudi was here, she would say that and Larry's the same way, is that her 5 races have all been championships. Is the championships, and Melissa would understand this, is that they used to be 40, 45 miles, and they're all run around in the Sierras, and it was pretty grueling. And then we've all gotten a little bit softer. So I would say the average championship race is probably 32 miles, something like that. So it's probably 32 miles, and it's very, very doable. You just have to pace yourself. We also have a shorter distance. So usually we always have a long course, which is about 32 miles, 30. And the way they set the course, or the way the course is set, is they want the race to be able to be, initially the race, they wanted it to be able to be won between 3 to 3.5 hours. There's not a whole lot of us who go that fast anymore. So the time has gone up a little bit. But so we usually have a long course of 30 to 35 miles, and then a short course of 20 miles. And the short course is fine, but you get this like awesome belt buckle if you do the long course. So it's always worth it.
Good. Next question is, which Facebook page is more Texans? And I'm not sure which one that would be. I am so thankful. We are finally starting to get into the middle of the country a little bit. There was just a race last weekend, Unos Dos Tres, which was in Texas. There's a woman named Rita Pritchard who is really pushing Riding Tie in Texas. And so I would say join both those Facebook pages and watch, because Texas is up and coming for us. Next question. AERC sometimes has intro clinics with a trail ride or short intro ride. Are there intro clinics to practice for Riding Tie?
We do one. We have the depending on where you are, the Old Dominion has a Riding Tie weekend it's the 3rd weekend in July now. We put it in July because we figured there wouldn't be too much competition with other events. We have a nighttime Riding Tie, but we also have a clinic. And and I suspect we're not the only ones. I think that's the point, is I think there's probably a lot of people that do this once you get into the system. But so for the Old Dominion, which is in Virginia, we have a clinic on Saturday, usually Saturday afternoon, which is sort of, again, what we're doing here, here's my tack, here's what I do, here's how I put it on my horse. And then we have a Riding Tie Saturday night, and then another one Sunday morning, so people can practice. And I suspect there's other places who do the same thing.
And I would also say, ask any questions you have on those Facebook pages, and you'll be amazed how much information you get about that on those pages. Last question, I'm going to answer it because Lonnie already answered it in her way. And that is, this session is awesome and inspiring. Please consider a follow-up YouTube how-to video on Riding Tie knots. I think if I can master that at home, I'll give it a try. And we can do that. We've talked about doing that. Lonnie uses the rope that she ties to a tree. When my daughter was 14, one of our second race, she didn't tie the horse particularly well. She wasn't great at knots. The horse got loose. That was the one that was gone for a few hours when the endurance rider brought it back. And so ever since then, we have used it's basically one of those flat rope, kind of like a lunge line. And I buy a military grade that's like 5,000 pound capacity, so they're not going to pull it loose. And we tie just brass rings into the rope, and then put a bull clip at the end of it. And we tie that rope to the end of the halter, and then wrap it around the tree. You could see it in that video I did, and clip it. And you don't have to know how to tie a knot at that point. And I haven't had trouble with that at all. Lonnie is correct. If you do it her way, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to get to the tree and the horse's head will be there and nothing else. And that may not be true for the way we do it. But that's one option. But I'm hoping we can do a number of YouTube how-to videos like that, because I think that would be helpful. Just because we get so many questions about tack and how to tie and all that kind of stuff, how to train, all that kind of stuff. So that is something that I hope that we can be doing in the future. Well, that's all the questions that we have, and we've run kind of long, but I hope that this has been good. Does anybody have anything else you need to say? Any of our panelists for the good of our evening?
I would just say, get out and give it a try.
Absolutely.
You're gonna have fun.
Yeah.
I think one thing we had talked about, but we didn't actually include in this, is that if you are in Texas or you are in Iowa and you want to have a local endurance ride, add Riding Tie, talk to Courtney, get in touch with Courtney, because especially if you understand where the ride manager is coming from, the ride managers have just sacrificed a year and all their money to put this ride on. So you don't want to add trouble to their day. And so Courtney can tell you how to approach them and say, hey, I'd like to add a ride and tie. This is the benefit to you, and we'll make sure it's as smooth and easy as possible. And that way you can have ride and ties in the middle of the country where we haven't quite gotten as established yet. So talk to Courtney if you want to encourage a ride to add a competition.
And you can find my contact information on rideandtie.org. I'm also on both the Ride and Tie Facebook page and the East Coast page. And talk to your ride manager, because for at least the next 2 years, Ride and Tie is offering a stipend for ride managers, 10 stipends a year for ride managers, to encourage them to put on a ride and tie. And so they can, if it's a 3-day ride, we could give them up to $750 to help put that ride on. And so it's to their advantage to do that as well. So if you want to do a ride and tie and there's already an AERC ride going on, give them a holler and say, hey, get in touch with Courtney and maybe you can get some more money. And I'd like to try this ride and tie thing. And it's very easy to put the two together, and I can help them with that. All right. Anything else? Well, thanks to our panelists. Thanks to everybody that has spent almost 2 hours with us now, I guess, or not quite that long. But thank you so much, and I hope to see you guys out there on the trail.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.